People are going to need to know why. Welcome to the podcast. Wes is going to start us out with a little home picking. We call this freestyling, and we'll see how it goes. Thank you for that, Wesley. Now, welcome to Scott D. Medlock's podcast. I am Scott D. Medlock, and I say Scott D. Medlock because there's a lot of other people named Scott Medlock in Missouri. So Scott D., like Dean Medlock, is my name. And this is my first podcast. That's my son Wesley behind me with a thumbs up. Hi. And for the first podcast, I guess the vlog, I don't know about this stuff, but it's something. Sorry, there's a bug up on the wall. Anyhow, I just wanted to talk to everybody about things that are happening in the economy, things that I'm paying attention to for years, and finally taking the time to kind of put it all down, what I've had on my mind. Yes, I have a black hat on, so it makes it look like I'm like one with the curtains in the back, but just kind of go with it, all right? That's the first shot here. So anyhow, years ago, I began to see patterns of things that just didn't make sense, right? So, as many of you know, the healthcare situation really started getting worse in the early 2000s. You know, the late 90s, it was not great, but at least you could afford premiums, and your deductibles weren't horrible, right? But then as time goes along, why the deductibles get higher and higher, healthcare gets worse and worse, and not like what's provided. So I don't want to like tick off all the nurses and doctors out there, right? But I'm just talking about the financial aspect of it. The financial aspect of it gets worse and worse. And really, we, as employees, we really don't know the backstory, right? We don't know why it is that our insurance is getting worse. It's costing more at the hospitals. It's costing more at the doctor's office. Do you have a $20 copay, a $50 copay, $200 copay at the emergency room, depending on whether you've got Blue Cross or whichever. I mean, whichever one. And as I go through and think about all these things, I can remember back in 2004 that I had worked for a company, and our deductibles for the family had went up to $10,000. And with that, it's really kind of shocking to think that, back then your deductible's 10 grand. And, a guy's making, $18 an hour. So, yeah, you're over a third of your income can potentially go to a medical issue. So, with looking at those things, over the years, I've thought about different ideas and ways to possibly address the continuous extraction, if you would. I'm going to call it extraction because that's what it is. What happens is these companies, they continue to extract money from the bottom so they can put it on the top. Now, as I get into this, you're going to think, well, yeah, Scott, no kidding, right? So here's the thing, right? So you look at what happened and why, okay? So today, well, not just like today, this minute, but if you look back even just in the last couple of years, you've heard the word K, the letter K shaped economy, right? How many of you heard K shaped economy? Raise your hand. Just kidding, you don't have to raise your hand. But anyway, the K shaped economy. Everybody on the news is a specialist, and they tell you exactly nothing. Nobody tells you what happened. Nobody tells you where things went wrong. Nobody tells you why things are the way they are. They just tell you what things are the way they are. Hey, America, look, we're in a K-shaped economy. K-shaped economy. CNN, K-shaped economy. Fox News, K-shaped economy. Bloomberg News, K-shaped economy. They talk about the K-shaped economy. They tell you, well, now we're in a dual economy, which is a K-shaped economy. That dual economy means that the people on the upper end, the people making 100 grand, 200 or plus or more, they're not really feeling the same things that the folks on the bottom end of the economy are feeling. The people on the bottom end of the economy, what are they feeling? Well, let me tell you, the people on the bottom end of the economy are feeling a lot of pain, right? You're feeling it in your checkbook. You're feeling it in your wallets. You're feeling it in your bank accounts. And the reason you're feeling it in your bank accounts is because we have been left behind. The people on the bottom, people make less than $100,000 a year, have been left behind. And nobody who makes more than that can even understand what it feels like to be on the bottom. So, if you got a guy or gal, right, whoever, is working somewhere making $20 an hour. Well, that person is making $800 cash a week. The problem that we have is that the rent for someone like that, or even a couple, or a single mother, whomever, the rent is between $800 and $1,200 a month. Well, that means that 1 week plus a half of your next week's check goes to rent. And in reality, it's actually more than that because you're paying taxes, you're paying healthcare premiums, you're paying all these things that, to somebody who's making a higher wage, doesn't seem all that bad. And then you move over into, you might be paying a little bit into your 401k, which is a bunch of junk. I'm sorry, that's my opinion. The 401ks suck. So anyhow, all of your outgoes exceed your income, and unless you're like 2 or 3 incomes in a household, it's really hard to make things work. And so I think that you all are feeling that. That's what I think. I mean, I could be wrong, right? I mean, you all could be out there just blowing it away, and there's only like 10 poor people in the world, but I don't think that's the case. So over time, I started working on a book project about 30 years ago. Well, 25, 30 years ago. Because I started seeing some things and trends that I wanted to address. I wanted to, have an opportunity to talk to people about it because I may not be right. And that's okay. If I'm not right, then I'm not right, and this ain't hurting nobody. But what I'm seeing and what I've been looking at is what is wrong. Well, don't just tell me that we're in a K-shaped economy. Tell me why. Don't you want to know why? I want to know why. Tell me why the corporate ladder is making the decisions that they make. Tell me why. Why are you making the decision to create layoffs? And then the next week you're telling us we got to work so hard that we're behind schedule and things are wrong. Tell me why research and development projects are put off, and at the same time, the shareholders are getting their payouts. Y'all ever have these questions? I know I have lots of questions. And so, I have all these questions. And like I said, I began to work on this book project, and I had some ideas about, what might help, what might work. And And so I bring it up to people. I run into a fella years ago. He was a vice president for a certain company, and I caught him. He was out on the shop floor, and I said, "Hey, what do you think about this idea?" And I said, "I mean, y'all put out that we have X amount of dollars that we as a self-funded company use to support the medical costs, right? Because we're a self-funded medical company, or for medical costs for employees." And I said, "Well, how about if we made an investment that the interest off the investment would actually pay those bills? I mean, then you wouldn't have to pay it anymore. I mean, it'd be a large number, no joke. But once we got to that point and we weren't paying those medical bills anymore because the interest off of the investment would pay it, then you've got all that money on your bottom line you could do something with." And the guy looked at me like I was stupid, and that's fine. So he said, "Well, we kind of already do that." And I said, "Well, no, actually you don't. Because I looked at the available records and financials that I could find online, and you don't actually do that. But I appreciate your time." And he went about his way. So you go with that kind of thing, right? So as I'm sitting there, I was driving a fork truck, man. I mean, you figure this guy's a VP. He comes in, some old hillbilly like myself is trying to make sense of life and just basically blows me off because I'm an idiot fork truck driver. Maybe it wasn't that, but I'm thinking it's probably what it was. So anyhow, you fast forward a little bit, I began to just write things down. And that was back in the early 2000s. And as I went along, I'd have different ideas. And I've been blessed to know several people that are self-employed, have their own businesses and stuff. And I try to share with them some of my ideas. And you always get that's not going to work. So, okay, well, it's fine. I mean, I could be wrong, and I've been wrong a lot, so we'll deal with that. But anyhow, move forward a few years, and I'm not an author, not an author, but I'm not like a great writer or anything of that nature. But I do jot down my thoughts and ideas, and I come up with some sort of a manuscript, and I said, okay, well, this is pretty good. So I shared it with some folks, and people look at me like I'm nuts, which, okay, whatever. It's kind of getting to be a theme, you see that? So as we go along, I just put it on the shelf and then don't worry about it. And then, a few years goes by, man, and I struggle. Man, dude, I know you struggle. Some of y'all out there struggle maybe worse than I have. I mean, you try to live life on a basic income and try to make priorities, family first priorities, and all these other things that you try to do. And you basically just have enough to live, right? I mean, your bills are paid, your groceries are in the refrigerator, roof's over your head. Your kids got what they need, and that's about where you're at, So there's nothing wrong with that, but I think that the American dream really was not just supposed to be just barely get along street. So, I kept pushing on this book project, and I'd put it down, and I'd pick it up here and there, and so finally last year, there's a lot of thoughts swirling around up here, and it's not just business and economics and stuff. There's a lot of weird stuff up there that I probably won't share with you. But anyhow, what I am going to share with you is this book that I started writing. So I started writing, I took the old manuscript out. Let me back up. I took the old manuscript out, and then I started to look at it, and I went down to the river, sat there on a picnic table, and I just read through it again. And I got to thinking, this isn't just one book. I mean, because really it's applicable across all three scales, right? So you got your small business, right? Small business, and then you've got the larger companies like your Fortune 500, and then you've got the national level, right? So national economical level. Okay. I don't have a degree in economics, so be nice to me. But, I started putting this stuff together, and, I started getting some ideas down, and so I split the manuscript into three. So I made 3 separate books, and the first one is The Golden Age of Business for small business. The second one is The Golden Age of Business for the Fortune 500. And the third one is The Golden Age of Business for national economics. Okay. And like I said, I don't have an economic background. I'm basing everything off of observations the last 25, 30 plus years of just watching things turn to donkey hockey, for lack of a better word. So, as I consider through all these things, and I started writing those 3 books, I got them kind of going. I got the first one done and the second one done, but then I asked myself the question: why would somebody want to read these books? And so anyhow, I look at these things and I thought, well, people are going to need to know why, because that's my question in the beginning: is why is the economy K-shaped? What happened? How do I know? Where did it start? Who made the first, regulation or business decision that really kind of started the ball rolling? And, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and, 90s was kind of the kicking around time, and things were good. Actually, back then, they were pretty good. I mean, some hard stuff, but overall, it was pretty good times. And I know I made more money in the 90s than I made now. So, I mean, that's kind of a thing. But, as you look at all the stuff that goes on, I had to really stop and just start asking questions. And that's really, to me, that's the biggest thing that we all need to do, is to really ask the right questions. And so the right questions aren't what are we experiencing now? The right question is why. Why are we experiencing what we're experiencing? And so largely that's what the next set of books, which I'm going to share one with you today, the next set of books is going to cover the why. Okay, from as best as I can research and figure and find out, as quickly as I could pull together information and put it together in some sort of logical sequence, right? And I will tell you that I put paperwork together and I put it into Grok AI, and I said, dude, look, you got to put this in order for me. And so it helped me put things in order. And so I established all of these different ideas. And so my first book in the Foundation series is what I call it. The first book is called Debt, the Systematically Neglected Elephant in the Room. And the reason it's called systematically neglected rather than willfully neglected is because of what I found in my research. And give me just a second here. I need to get this off. All right, I'm back, and the reason I had to stop there is because my phone ran out of memory. I have great equipment to work with here, but I'm thankful to have something. So anyhow, what I was saying was, and the air conditioner kicked on, that's why the lights blinked. So anyhow, back to what I was saying. The book that I've put together is called Debt, the Systematically Neglected Elephant in the Room. If anybody has ever suffered through mega debt, it built up, it sneaks up on you, whatever situation it is, right? You're going along fine, everything's good, then all of a sudden you have a medical bill that's $10,000. Well, who the heck has $10,000 in the bank? I know it sure isn't any blue collar people that I know. And, so you look at that, you go to the doctor, you get your thing, praise God, you get through it. But at the same time, when you get done, you come home and you get $10,000 worth of medical bills, and then that's on top of, the refrigerator went out last week, so that was $1,100. And then, the air conditioner went down, that was $4,200. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Just life really sucks sometimes for people. And, just want to talk about that, right? So debt, the systematically neglected elephant in the room, has a lot to do with the why, okay? Because I really want to know why. I want to know why about pretty much everything. I tear things apart and put things back together. That's kind of the thing that I do. I do it less now because I'm old and I don't want to be outside in the rain and the snow and the ice and stuff. But, I can do this book writing stuff inside and research and, just put together the things that I thought about. At any rate, I'm rambling on. So back to the idea here is I titled the book originally, actually it's had like 12 titles, but this one that I settled on is Debt, the Systematically Neglected Elephant in the Room. And why do I say that? Well, first, the title before this one was Debt, the Neglected Elephant in the Room. And I said that because, well, as a blue-collar man, I'm kind of angry at the establishment. Don't look at me that way, because I know you are too. I hear everybody talking. I can hear everybody. Everybody's talking about, how greedy the CEOs are, how greedy companies are, and how horribly they treat their people. And don't tell me you don't hear that. You said it yourself. Come on, just be real. Be real, okay? I'm just being real. So here's the deal, right? So I started to look into this and I started to research it. And by the time I got done putting stuff together for this first book, I realized that if I was in their shoes, I'd have done the same thing. Hang me, right? I mean, some of the little things they did weren't necessarily greed motivated, but there were incentives. Let's say there were incentives. And so that's really where I begin to dig. What was the incentives? Why did things change, right? And as I looked at it, I looked at a lot of things, and I had to go back to legislation. What was passed 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, which wasn't that far back, fellas, ladies. That was, 30 years ago was the 90s, so we had to go back farther, 50. I'm saying about 50 years ago plus, and actually it really kind of started in 1971, 1972, somewhere in that area. And some of my older folks that are out there, like my parents' age, they will remember whenever we decoupled the dollar from the gold standard. There was a time when the dollar and the gold standard would kind of coincide with a man's wages. So the gold standard was $35 an ounce in 1971 or 2, somewhere in there. I say it in the book. But what happened was, at the end of the week, a man's wages should be enough to buy enough gold to get by. That's kind of what the idea was. But what happened was historically, because we had the dominating dollar across the world, around the world, through the world, if it's a flat world, over the world, I don't care. But at any rate, everywhere in the world was using the dollar. But what was happening, I believe, is that other countries would get our dollars, and then they would send them to us to trade it for our gold. Right? Who wants to give up your gold? I mean, I don't want to give up my gold. So as we go along and you look at that, you think, well, decoupling the gold, somebody just sent me a reel. That's the crazy thing about working on a phone. Anyways, so by the time you look at that, you look at the decoupling. Why? Okay, so the why is we don't want to lose our gold and end up sitting on a pile of money that's worth nothing because the gold's in somebody else's hands. So they decoupled the dollar. It was great legislation. They thought it was wonderful. They looked great. What that did for us is that created what they call the fiat money, which is a little greenbacks you carry in your wallet. Well, used to. Now we got digital currency, but the little greenback things, the little pieces of paper that says different denominations, 1, 5, 10, 20, 50, 100, 500 maybe. I don't know, never seen one. Those kind of things. And so what that did is that gave the government the ability to kind of flood money into the market if they needed to. They could add liquidity by borrowing. So they literally could borrow against the GDP and then basically flood the market with money to help things out, right? And so throughout the 70s, you had stagflation, stagnation, some sort of Asian stuff, and Not Asian. I'm not being racist. No, Asian. A-T-I-O-N. Asian, like inflation. And so anyhow, they started having all this stuff, and then you had the gasoline crisis and all these things in the 70s, and things got pretty gnarly, right? And so they did what any normal country would do with a fiat currency. They made new legislation in 1982. Everybody knows who Ronald Reagan is. He's one of everybody's favorite presidents in the whole wide world, and he's one of the biggest people that caused us to have the K-shaped economy. I'm sorry to tell you that. Be nice to me. Okay. Anyways, so they started legislation where in 1982 they made a tax deregulation, right? So corporations couldn't expand because, well, they're paying 70-80% taxes. Individuals are paying 50-60-70% taxes. And so they reduced the taxes. Well, if you reduce the taxes, then you're going to have an increase in productivity because companies can then use their income to invest in research and development, such and so on, and such things. And so begin to see the boom that we had in the 1980s. Well, booms and bust cycles only last for so long because they're made with money that didn't exist in that other time. But so anyhow, we went through all of that stuff. And then as we went through, we go into the 1980s, into the 90s, and then we had different things happen in the 90s that caused boom-bust cycle. So y'all remember, I'm sure most of us are pretty still sore about the 2008 crisis, right? I'm going to jump way ahead here. The 2008 crisis was there because of all that we've been talking about. So what happens is regulations were put into place to where interstate credit cards could be issued. People were getting credit cards, and the money in the 90s was easy because we were making pretty decent money at the time, and then credit went nuts. I mean, I can remember being 22, 23 years old, and I opened a credit card thing. It was like, hey, all you gotta do is swipe this card and you get $100,000. Congratulations, you flip the thing over. It says, but it's 33% interest. And I was like, okay, I'm kind of a moron, but I'm thinking $33,000 a year in interest doesn't sound like a good idea to me. So I cut that card up, thank God. So anyhow, you go through that, and then into the 90s, I call it the credit card boom when Clinton was in there, because everything was rocking and rolling, and people were making pretty good money in the 90s. And so what happens is, by the end of the 90s, you end up getting into this bust cycle because everybody's got credit card debt and a lot of people can't pay them off. And so with that, I had a notification. Sorry, I looked down. So with that, you've got people buying houses, and then people start refinancing their houses to pay off their credit cards. Well, that happens, and it goes on into the Bush era with Bush number 2. And with Bush number 2, people are refinancing their houses. And then by the time we get to 2008, well, the people that refinanced their houses that paid off their credit cards, they didn't cut up their credit cards. So then we had, by the end of 2008, we had everybody on countrywide mortgages with 125% mortgages. And then NAFTA, good old NAFTA, remember the North America Free Trade Agreement that sent all of our industry overseas? Well, then you had things happening like Chrysler shutting down, other large manufacturers shutting down and move either north, south, or out to China. And so our industry began to collapse. And so once our industry collapsed, then people couldn't pay their mortgages. Then Countrywide was screwed. And it was a bad time. I mean, if you lived through 2008 and you lost your job, I'm sorry. It sucked. So anyway, you get through all of that mess, and then, we get through and all of the bailouts. They bailed out Ford and Dodge and Chevy and Chrysler, and everybody got a bailout, even though they weren't even here anymore because they left. Everybody's getting bailouts. And then there was the one bank, I forgot which one it was. I'd have to look it up. But the one bank was able to come in and bail out Countrywide, and the government bailed out all these other companies so that we could keep going. But what happened? Well, what actually happened was we borrowed a lot of money to bail out these companies. We didn't just have money in the bank. So the U.S. borrowed its own money, sent it out for bailouts, and yeah, some of people paid them back and whatever. I don't want to get into all that junk, but anyhow, people, we didn't pay it back. The government didn't pay the money back. We just sat there with a national deficit, just screaming and hollering, and that cycle pretty much just keeps continuing. We get to the end of a point where, we're doing good, but then all of a sudden we've reached the end point, and then we have the bust cycle. And then in the bust cycle, we borrow a bunch of money and we get things going again, or we reduce taxes again, or you know what I'm saying? We keep going through these cycles, but my concern is that we're running out of these tax reductions and borrowing capabilities. I don't know, the other day I was looking, it was like we're national debt somewhere around 39 trillion. And if you've paid attention to any of the news at all, you can see that they're trying to pull the levers of going to zero income tax, zero federal income tax, zero state income tax, different places. Dude, once we're out of taxes to not pay anymore, I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't want to pay taxes, but once that lever is pulled and there's zero, there's no room left to rebound. Okay, if you're paying 5% or say 20% in taxes, 5, 10, 20%, whatever, say you're in that tax bracket, right? They pull that lever and you ain't paying that no more, and then you max out again on your credit and all that stuff, you don't have 5% more income that they can give you back. It's over. Game over. And that's my concern as to where we're at. I think we're at game over. We're not quite there, but we're close. And so, obviously my normal mantra is get out of debt as best you can. I know it's not easy for everybody, especially with the way wages are and the way rent is and all that stuff. But sorry, this is not a doomsday thing. I want this to be a positive cycle because I think we can fix it. And I think we can fix it. And I'm going to do my best to present some ideas in my writing that will hopefully push us in the right direction. So with that, I'm going to give you a little visual of my book that I put out. It's called Debt, the Systematically Neglected Elephant in the Room. And in that book, which is right here with me, you can order your copy. I don't know if that's straight for you or not. I don't know how this video stuff works. But anyways, DEBT. And I made that nice little elephant on there. See that elephant on there? That's my name. See, I put the D in there so people would know it was me. And so there's a little ticker sign and, a little elephant, big old fatty, And so anyhow, some of that stuff in here is, let's see here. I'll just read you the executive summary, then I'll quit, okay? In Debt, the Systematically Neglected Elephant in the Room, Scott D. Medlock delivers a pragmatic dissection of how modern economic incentives have eroded the American dream, not through malice or incompetence, but through rational responses to a flawed system. That's what I was talking about earlier. I don't think that all these CEOs and executives have done this with malice. I don't think they purposely are like, let's put our thumb on them little pinballs down there at the bottom and see how much we can squeeze out of them. I don't think they did that. I mean, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, right? Drawing from over 30 years of grassroots experience in the trenches of American industry, factory floors, union halls, and community aftermaths of economic upheaval, Medlock identifies the elephant as the debt-fueled boom-bust cycle that has dominated since 1971 abandonment of the gold standard. This supercycle, amplified by shareholder primacy, financialization, and unchecked leverage, devalues the dollar, displaces risks onto workers and households, and normalizes fragility while masquerading as efficiency. The book opens with a historical spark, the end of the Bretton Woods, which untethered the dollar from the gold, unleashing fiat flexibility that prioritized monetary control and crisis aversion over long-term stability. This set the stage for the 1980s Reaganomics revolution, tax cuts and deregulation, sold as supply-side liberation but reshaping incentives towards short-term extractions. I wish I could read, man. Medlock argues these policies, while revolutionary in intent, delivering initial growth, incubated financial engineering without mandating shared prosperity, leading to surging corporate and national debt, and a system where borrowing substituted for genuine discipline. At the corporate level, The narrative zeroes in on shareholder primacy, operational takeover. Key enablers like the 1993 Section 162M tax code provision and advertently turbocharged stock-based executive pay, turning balance sheets into compensation tools rather than resilience anchors. Stock buybacks, often debt financed. You get that? Them dudes are borrowing money to do this stuff. Normalize continuous value withdrawal, inverting capital allocation, maintenance deferred horizons, shorten leverage embedded as dependency. And I talk about leverage buyouts, some other things that's happening. And then it says, yet the book is not defeatist. It rejects bad actor blame, viewing outcomes as foreseeable, incentives and consequences. At its core, this conversation is about trade-offs, efficiencies, boundary with resilience, and a reminder that systems built by choice can be redesigned. For corporate leaders, investors, and citizens, it's a timely framework to pause and ask, does this leverage event serve the future intents? In other words, the CEO, he needs to ask the question, will this decision that I'm making, will it impact my employees? Will it cause me to make layoffs later down the road? What's this going to actually do for the company, rather than just saying, oh, hey, we're going to make this quarter's numbers look good for the shareholders, and, well, whatever happens, because I'm happy because, well, I'm a shareholder. So, anyhow, that's what the book is. That's what it's about. If you want to get a copy, you can get a copy. I'll leave a link down in the description. And I'm going to leave it with that. And I appreciate your time and having a good look at this. My name is Scott.